I am recording, so go for it.
Okay.
There's 4 of us now. It's the drive, it's a long drive to get to your computer.
It doesn't really help me because when I do the BCC meeting, you're seeing what you see here.
Anyway, good morning. Today is, I gotta look at the calendar. Today is, don't tell me, June 9th, Tuesday. And Gary, we're gonna start our work session. I believe it's a lot of issues today.
I have a lot of issues, but we also have items for you, board, to go over today. That was humor, thank you. First, we'll start with roll call. Chair Bernard.
Here.
Commissioner Fisher. She waved.
Here. Sorry, put my glasses on.
No worries. Commissioner Savas.
Here.
Commissioner Humberston.
Here.
Commissioner Schrader is not yet with us, but should be shortly. Yes, we have quite a bit of issues for your issues list today. We have 90 minutes this morning until 11:30 a.m. and we have a continuation at 3 p.m. today if needed. So we'll take the time for you to have these conversations. We'll start, as always, with a coronavirus update, and our Director of Disaster Management and Incident Commander of the Emergency Operations Center, Nancy Bush, will lead us. Go ahead.
Your mic.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. So today, we're going over our numbers in Oregon. There are now 4,922 positives, and that was up over the weekend, 352 cases. We have 164 deaths in the state and 1,444,957 negatives. Clackamas County has 377 positives. That was up 38 over the weekend. We have 12 deaths. We have 13,604 negatives. Multnomah County has 1,302 positives, 65 deaths, and 30,402 negatives. Washington County has 800 positives, 18 deaths, 19,695 negatives. A couple things to note here. This weekend was the highest number that we have had since the event started for the state of Oregon as well as Clackamas County, which is fairly significant. On Sunday alone, we had 22 cases reported, and our average has not been over 12. So just, and on Saturday, we had 16. So both of those days, we actually had over our normal high of 12. A lot of those cases were related to a long-term care facility or to an employer, but we also did have several that were community cases too. And the public health is, of course, working very diligently now to do the contact tracing, because any one of these cases could have 1, 2, 3, up to, maybe 20 contacts. So that is where a lot of the work goes to the contact tracing. So there's a lot to do after our weekend. Public health continues to work on testing and contract and agreements. That testing for the public as well as the underserved communities. And we are still hearing a lot of concerns about contact tracing from our general public. So we continue to work with PGA to get that information out and what contact tracing really is. Please answer the phone, of course, when we call, and making sure that they understand that they're safe, that we'll never ask for any information like a social security number, any money, or those types of things. So we continue working on that campaign. PGA is also refreshing a campaign for wearing face coverings. And that will also be done in several languages. So what we're planning on doing is, we had the campaign where someone would hold up the sign and said, I stay at home for this reason. So we want to change that now to, I'm wearing a face covering for this reason. It's easily done in several languages. So we'll be doing that. And we would like to invite the commissioners, if you'd like to be a part of that campaign, we'd be happy to work with you on that as well. We are reaching out to our school districts regarding summer food programs, just to kind of see if they have any support needs over the summer. And this week, we're distributing 100 food boxes through Bridging Cultures and 160 food boxes Thursday at the 91 school. Our Who's Open app now has 453 total entries from businesses and over 24,000 views on that particular app. Finally, I just want to note that the state legislature's emergency board approved $55 million of CARES funding that is for rent assistance. Clackamas County is going to be receiving $2.8 million of those dollars. The notice came in last night at 5:41 p.m. And the deadline for returning everything to the state for signature is noon tomorrow. So it's a very, very, very tight turnaround. We, right now, Social Services, County Council, and the EOC are working to get everything completed and updated. And we will be sending that and asking Gary Schmidt's signature on that because it's such a tight turnaround. We don't have time to take it to the BCC. But I think Gary will then be taking it to the BCC on Thursday for ratification.
Can I ask you to pause there, Nancy? Commissioners, do you have any concern that I sign this on your behalf so that we can receive $2.8 million of state funding? May I do that?
Not a problem.
Okay, and then of course we'll ratify it at this Thursday's business.
So we did know that money was going to come down quickly. We didn't know it was going to be that fast because I was hoping that we would be able to get it to you Thursday for signature, but they are requiring it back Wednesday at noon.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
So is this money that people will request from us to help defer their rent payments?
So it is dollars. We actually will be working with community organizations to get the rent money out and doing some agreements through them. So we'll work through, and we already have that relationship built into social services. So we're working on updating those agreements or making new agreements. So they will be working through the organizations you normally do work through.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Humberston also has a question.
Yeah, just send us two questions really. One, send us what you just told us about that fund by an email, some bullet points on that, so the public can be made aware that doesn't happen to be listening to this. And then my other question is going back to your report on COVID-19 with the spike in positives. How much of that would you attribute to an increased testing versus greater exposure as a result of moving into phase 1?
That is a good question, and I'm not sure I have a really good answer for that. I do know that many of the cases were related to outbreaks that we already had in a long-term care facility that we were working on and with an employer. So the community cases, yeah, I'm not sure if they, it's coming from increased testing. Well, and what I think what is happening too, of course, our contacts tracing now is, if you recall in the presentation, it was like maybe that person had 5, but now with the new contact tracing, they may have 15. So it's also, we're expanding that testing. So it probably is coming from that expansion and looking at other cases as well as just increased testing.
Okay, thank you.
And then Pacific Seafood had over 100 people.
They had 124 over the weekend.
That's a huge group.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huge. Yeah. So Lincoln City Lincoln County has quite a challenge on their hands right now.
Commissioner Fisher?
Well, I just want to make sure that Nancy's done with her update.
I am. Yes. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm concerned about the outbreak in the care facility, and I know that the state of Oregon is in charge of regulating and licensing care facilities, but yet we're at the local level doing the public health response when that happens. I'm just wondering, what is the concerted effort to work in partnership with the state for prevention? I had the privilege of being on a call with healthcare professionals, oh gosh, it was a while ago now, where they talked specifically about all the best practices about preventing an outbreak in a care facility. And it's not easy, but there's definitely best practices out there. Can you give me any insight about what's going on, or if we need to advocate with the state for anything in particular that would be helpful?
Yes, from my understanding right now, public health is working very closely with the state as well as the long-term care facility to control the outbreak, doing some education among the staff as well as, working with them and with their residents. So right now there is a good relationship and a lot of attention being given to that outbreak at this time.
I'm mostly concerned about how do we facilitate best practices across all of our facilities? What's our role as the public health authority? And what do we need in order to do that effectively, given that we are not responsible for the regulation or the licensing of these facilities?
Okay. Yeah, I would have to talk to the public health staff here to get a more complete answer for you, which I can provide through an email if that's okay. Okay.
Mr. Savas?
Yeah, so last week I had asked the question about the outbreak at Bob's Red Mill, which was public at that time, and you guys provided me the answer. It was not a result of us going into phase one. It was basically they were doing business as they were doing business pre-phase one. But I think whether I thought it or I said it, but where I was going with that, and now that we have more time, I think it'd be a good idea for us. I'd like to have the information of the numbers of the outbreaks in Clackamas County, how many of them are basically an outbreak from one particular place, whether it's a care facility, whether it's a business, and so forth. And not that we need to know the particulars about that business. Maybe it could be categorized in a care facility or employer or manufacturing or whatever, or food processing, whatever it may be. But I think I would like to look at the raw numbers as far as how we're doing as Clackamas County, as a community, and making sure, because I don't want people to feel that, if an outbreak, for example, let's use the one in Newport at Pacific Seafood, we can't use that and use that against the entire state if the entire state's doing good work. I think we need to know what's working and not give people the feeling of despair and the feeling that whatever they're doing isn't working. So I think it's a good idea to kind of gauge and to help us find a balance as to, what's happening. And I think learn lessons out of those would be valuable too. I know that the business community is asking, some of them have seen the guidelines, some of which I have pointed them to the state guidelines. But I think it'd be valuable to, excuse me 1 minute for noise here, sorry, background noise. Well, I guess as we talk about phase two, I think it's important that we actually gauge what we're doing based not on necessarily the isolated incidents, but as what we're doing as far as today. We're advising people wear a protective face mask, social distancing, staying at home as much as possible. I think we need to have some assurances that those are actually working, and then how we phase into increasing activity as we cope and go along in this crisis. So I have more to talk about on phase two questions, but that's later in the agenda, right, Gary? It's not now.
Actually, you could do that now if you wanted. After Nancy, you're done with your update. Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So before I just talk on or bring up the other issue, can you maybe, is that something we can do, Nancy, to parse out, what are the isolated instances and maybe how are we doing when we extract those out of the numbers and look at the numbers and say how many are those as a result of the new cases per day, as a result of us doing good work, or maybe in a week's time or something like that. I don't want to overburden you, but I think you know where I'm going.
Yeah, and I will have to talk to our public health staff as well as county council to see what we can provide.
Okay.
Yeah, because part of it could be a privacy issue, just depending on what we're looking at. So we'll work on that and see what we can give, maybe on a weekly basis or something. Daily is pretty intense when we have staff who are really stretched as it is. So maybe something weekly.
Right.
So let's talk about phase two. I did a CCBA thing. So evidently you can apply earlier before completing all 6 of the priorities or the requirements. That's measurements, but you know, I think we still have to wait to apply for phase 2, at least until next Wednesday when we get some more figures on the case count or whatever that count is that comes out on Wednesday, to decide whether we want to put in an application next Friday. You know, I know that for me, Dr. Present is going to be a key figure in this, because I know that last night we talked with the 3 chairs. There's a lot of nervousness, and you know, at one time we talked about doing this together, but boy, Multnomah County is way out there, and Washington County is probably way out there too. And I think we just have to have a good feeling that we're getting those source counts down. Has to be below 30%, I believe, and that our rate of is not climbing above 5%. Those are the 2 areas that we were lacking. And hopefully next week we'll have a better idea. We were way up on the one and brought it down to 39, if I remember right. So we're close, but we need to see that continue to go down or improve. But I don't know this time, is the application, is it a simple application?
It's a letter. It's a letter
Oh.
to the governor.
Okay. So, you know, if we saw next Wednesday that we were getting below 30%, I mean, that would be great. And then maybe we would, I'd love to hear from Dr. Present on Wednesday or Thursday.
She will be Thursday.
Okay, that way we can get a feel for, I want to hear what she has to say.
Yeah.
But so we are not going to go together, the 3 counties. It's just way too long.
Yeah, so, and the data, at least last week, it was the first week, the data did not come in until very late in the day on Wednesday. We did share it. I shared it with Mr. Schmidt as soon as I got it, and he shared it with you. So we probably won't see it until late in the day on Wednesday. And then we can have the conversation on Thursday, and Dr. Present will be here with me.
Okay, great. Martha had her? Martha.
So I'm worried that people think we're already opening up for phase 2 on June 12th, because that's the 21-day period. And have we done any messaging to make clear that that's not the case?
Yes, as in fact, I approved messaging yesterday around that very fact. And we are getting the same information here, that it's like some organizations or, you know, there's been pools saying, you know, they just think it's automatic, and it is not. So we've been putting public information out about that.
I think we might
Sorry.
see some things that we're not expecting, actually. If it doesn't get, I think some people are just going to go ahead and do it. And I don't know what our reaction is to that. But anyway.
Brenda, did you?
Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, I think I understand what Commissioner Schrader is trying to say, and I don't disagree. I think there's with the protests that have been taking place both in Portland and Salem, Eugene, and cities in Clackamas County and around us, I don't think people have obviously adhered to the governor's guidelines or the OHA guidelines, and that's unfortunate. And I think that the wave that might come out of there, which we don't know, and we're going to see nationwide, worldwide actually at this point, but we're going to see at least in the next week or two, we'll have national statistics as to those impacts, and that could grow, right? Because as people may not be aware, you know, that might take 2 or 3 weeks actually beyond that point to actually gauge as to how much that actually expanded as a result of people not just socializing. So I think it's important to watch that. But I think at the same token, for example, getting back to my original point I made earlier, the concern I have about, if our cases remain isolated as to an employer or a place of business or a care facility, whatever, those kind of situations, and our numbers actually, when extracted, don't look that bad. I would hate to have some anomalies like that, so to speak, be to the detriment of the areas that are especially south of here, maybe, that don't have those number of outbreaks. And I think the zip code analysis is a really good means of keeping an eye on that. And while I think applying for phase 2 is in and of itself one thing that I'm inclined to think we ought to at least apply, that's on the understanding, maybe not right in my head, but that's on the presumption I have that the state's going to be the actual one looking at the dashboard and saying, you're not ready for phase 2, but at least our application could be in if we did submit it.
Yeah.
So, on Friday, I did look because a lot of counties went into phase 2. The governor approved that, and one of which was Lane County. And Lane County's numbers looked, they only had 3. They only had 3 of positive numbers, and we had 2. So they met 3 of the criteria, or didn't meet 3 of the criteria, and we didn't meet 2 of the criteria, but yet the governor approved them to go into phase 2. So it's clear that you don't have to meet all the criteria. And I'm kind of curious with the Lincoln County situation, whether or not, again, those are isolated to a particular employer, if the governor's office or OHA is going to take action, because technically they're probably off the charts right now. But the hospital admissions will come, maybe, likely. And so I'm just kind of curious as to how the OHA is going to implement that and say, you know what, you're in phase 2, let's say Lincoln County, and we're going to put you back into phase 1. I guess I want to see that play out. I don't know what the plan is there, but I think the same applies for us. If we are in the queue for phase 2, and maybe that's a safe place to be, but we're not ready to go by the termination of our dashboard or the state, that's okay as well. I don't have a problem with that, provided it's based on good data and everything else. But we're on the verge of knowing here in about a week or so if we see a spike of untraceable cases of COVID as a result of the protest. That tracking, that contact tracing is going to be very difficult, obviously, right? How do you do that? And then our numbers are going to look even more discouraging.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And whenever it could be, and then that's part of the dashboard. It's like if you cannot, trace back a case to the index case, that's part of where we could fail. And that is actually, and when you look at the dashboards, that is really critical in being able to move forward. Because if you can't trace it back, it's just a community contact, which is not what we want.
Yeah. I actually listened to an economist this morning and listening about the potential recovery, either a V, a W, which is the worst case, or a swoosh, like Nike swoosh. A W, if we get back, the cases start shooting up and we have to shut down the country again, it's going to be really hard to shut down the country. And it's going to be 3 years, they think, to recover again. So a V is what they're hoping for. And it looks like it's possible, but anyway, I think let's hear from the doctor next week and, or this Thursday.
On Thursday.
Yeah, and then we'll have an idea where we're heading.
Commissioner Humberston?
Ken, your mic.
Like Commissioner Bernard, I'd like to hear what our doctor has to say. The rest of it, quite frankly, is there's no point in worrying about it because we don't have any control over most of the rest of it.
Yeah.
What we can do is we can look at what the numbers are in our county and where they're focused and how close we are to meeting the 6 criteria. This board can make a decision to put in an application or not based on those 2 factors. The rest of it, we don't have any control over. So we really are in a reactive mode based on what the numbers will be next Wednesday. So, you know, that's my 2 cents. In the final analysis, it's going to boil down to our trust in the judgment of our doctor. So I will leave it at that at this point.
Okay, are we ready to move on?
We have two hands.
Oh, okay.
There. Commissioner Fisher and then Commissioner Savas.
Thank you. So Nancy, and I've talked about this before, and I'm just not sure what's going on at the state level, but we've talked around this issue here, Paul mentioned it, about there's expected to be an increase in cases based on the protests. I know that some jurisdictions are expanding testing to really reach out to protesters across the country. And I'm just wondering if there's any conversations in Oregon about doing that, or what the thinking is about it. I mean, what?
We talked about it last night, the 3 chairs. No, that neither one of them are planning on testing.
Well, I'm just curious what the thinking is behind it, or is the idea that cases will increase based on the protest not a true fact? I mean, I don't know. I'm just looking for information.
So I know, in addition to what the chair said, OHA has not talked to us about that at this time that I'm aware of. And we, in every phase and when we open up, we do expect our cases to go up. That is part of, bringing, letting, people come back together and doing activities. And then whenever you throw in the protests, of course, I think all of you have said it. We have to watch that and see where it goes. Have they social distance? Many of them that, at least when I've seen, when I've been going home or whatever, do have masks on. But we don't know what it means yet. We just simply don't.
And just to add why Multnomah and Washington County said they're not going to do it. I mean, it's too many people. I think Deborah said 40,000 people. That's their guess. And to test all those would be impossible.
And many people are from other parts of, could it even be other parts of the country?
Yeah. I think Paul was next.
Yeah, well, take my comments constructively. I think that it's, I won't say it's deja vu, but when we were considering whether or not we're going to go into phase 1, I mentioned, especially to Gary, our administrator, my concern about messaging and making sure we get our messaging correct. And I know that we could not have predicted the unfortunate situation with the death of George Floyd and the protest and the outcome. So that's like, we didn't see that coming is in relation to this COVID topic. So for that, I'm just concerned that how we message out there, our approach to phase 2, our reasoning, and I want to make sure that we also currently, even ourselves, each of us, when we respond to whether it's at meetings and so forth, that we have the latest and most accurate information, because if we don't, or when we don't, we're called out or that's misinterpreted. And I have concerns about just the fact that we're not working in the office as a result of COVID. I think our communication breakdown is, I won't say a breakdown, maybe it's the right word, but it's a handicap. We're not as a well-oiled machine as we were when we were all back pre-COVID in the office doing our daily functions and our work. So with that, we had the discussion about, maybe there's a check-in, maybe we Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we would have a discussion, a brief meeting just to stay. And I maintain that that's really necessary. And we went now 2 weeks without that. And I think there's some mixed messaging that's out there and concerns already about a number of things. I mean, not even COVID related with this protest issue. So, which I know we're going to be talking about here shortly. But I just want to say that I think we really I would like to be prepared to talk about phase 2. And my last question to Nancy is this. if we, let's just say hypothetically, we take Thursday or we take Tuesday, and hypothetically, I mean, if there's a green light to go forward with phase 2, how much time will it take actually to apply?
We just have to write the letter and send it in.
Okay. And as Jim stated earlier, I know he read the letter. I know I've read the letter 3 times from the governor. You know, it says right in there, you don't have to wait for the 21-day period to apply for phase 2. You don't have to worry about, not just you have to worry, but basically essentially, you know, we could apply for phase 2 the day after the letter was issued, technically. And I'm not saying or suggesting, you know, based on our discussion we've had, that we should, that we shouldn't, or that we should have done it then. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that the messaging is what we're thinking and what our strategy is. I think that needs to be really clear, and how we interpret the governor's letter or other documents. I think we need to be accurate with that as well.
Agreed. And I really do want to encourage all of us to, you know, talk to Dr. President and make sure, you know, as our public health authority, I just want to be sure that we understand where our public health stands in this too, and have that discussion and a really full discussion there on Thursday.
I would say that Deborah Kafori was quite surprised to see the governor allow counties to open that had not reached the 6 measurements. She was very surprised. So was I.
Well, we were surprised.
So the message changes daily or hourly. It really does. And making sure that we're always aligned. We were probably aligned for an hour, and then an hour later, the message changes. All right, so shall we move on to the next issue, Gary?
Yes. Item 2 on your list is your emergency declaration for COVID-19, potential addendum number 3. Stephen Madcourt, County Council, sent a draft for you all. This is a chance for you to discuss that before it goes to your business meeting this Thursday for potential adoption. So Stephen, would you like to tee it up, please?
Sure. Good morning. We circulated last week a addendum number 3 to the emergency declaration resolution. What this essentially does is it keeps all emergency measures that the board has previously adopted, keeps them all in place, and it extends the measure to September, or the emergency declaration, until September 30th, 2020. We can always pull back on it if things ease up and improve within that time period, but it also allows us additional time in which to respond to the emergency without having to revisit the declaration on a regular basis. And it would attach to this addendum all the prior orders, resolutions, and addendums that this board has previously approved. And if you have any changes or additional measures that you wanted to include in there, that would be an additional emergency measure. This would be the time to include those. But at this date, we don't have any additional ones other than those previously approved. Any questions?
Commissioner Fisher, and then Commissioner Savas, and then Commissioner Humberston.
Stephen, I know we adjusted our original emergency declaration because of the governor doing a moratorium on evictions.
Correct.
And I'm just curious, where is the governor now with that? Because it seems that they should be expiring soon. And just so that the rest of the board knows, I've received some input from people asking if we were going to extend that as a county.
I can't recall, Commissioner Fisher, the date that the governor gave. I thought it was July 15th for some reason, and for her moratorium on evictions, but offhand, I don't know what that date is, and I certainly don't know what the governor's plans are with respect to extending that.
And let's move this one forward and we'll look into that and find out.
Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, well, for that reason somewhat that Commissioner Fisher raised, and a couple other reasons that I actually just spoke to, I have a little bit of input here. So don't have a problem with extending it, but I think it'd be wise, frankly, to us maybe to do this incrementally as opposed to just putting it out there till September. I mean, let's just say if the governor's one expires July 15th, maybe we have this extended till July 15th, right? To see what changes so that we can be, we can adjust as needed. The other piece of this that I'm concerned about is that people might look at this and say, oh, so they're going to extend it to September. Maybe people might misinterpret that is somehow related to phase 1 or phase 2, and there might be mixed messaging out of, or misunderstood messaging out of that. And same goes for maybe our employees as well, or their families. You know, how does that relate to going back to work at the workplace? So there is so much information out there, which is good. On the other hand, it's also confusing. And I'm just concerned that maybe the safest thing to do, I would ask you all, my colleagues, to consider is just extending this to July 15th, and knowing that we'll probably indeed have to go to September 15th, but we need to make some adjustments, we can. And it puts it right back in the forefront, which I think we need to be discussing as we navigate this.
What do you think? Did Ken have to stand up?
Yes.
Ken?
I'm inclined to agree with Commissioner Savas on that. I'd rather take an incremental approach because we don't know what the governor's reaction is going to be after July, on July 15th or after July 15th. Related to that, do we even have the authority to suspend the collection of rents and whatnot like that as a county, as opposed to the state making it as part of its emergency declaration? So unless Gary has some specific reasons other than convenience why we would extend it to September, I'm inclined to go along with Commissioner Savas's idea of just going to July 15th.
Why don't we come back to this? Maybe Stephen can find out about the governor's, unless you have already.
Expires June 30th, the governor's does.
Uh-huh.
Ours does too.
So we're just adding 15 days.
If you were to extend to July 15, it's just 15 days. We're no rush. We got June 30th ours is good until, but you could do it to July 30th, just do it 1 month incrementally. The 15 days isn't of any significance, though. July 15th is not an applicable date. It's June 30th.
Let's do July 30th. I mean, you guys good with that?
I'd like to hear from Gary.
My only comment, and I'll ask Nancy to confirm, is part of the benefit of an emergency declaration is it allows us to be eligible for federal disaster funding, which this is considered a disaster through FEMA. And so certainly month to month is fine, but I'm just concerned about our eligibility if we are not in a state of emergency. Nancy, can you confirm what I said, please?
Yes, that is true. So the concern is making sure that we have our declaration so we can do federal funding, get FEMA funding and those types of things. So we can do it month to month, but that is my primary concern at this time. And we are still, the EOC is still open and it will be open. My guess is for sure through July.
Let's do July 30th.
I'm okay with that.
So
Yeah.
how about a motion?
I still move.
Second.
So I'll revise it to the 30th, and we'll get it to your business meeting agenda for Thursday.
Okay.
Yeah. You don't need to approve today. It's on your agenda for this Thursday.
Okay.
So we can
All right.
revise the date to June 30th, July 30th.
Okay. Let's do that. And then about the 15th of June, we'll look at whether we want to extend it to the next month. All right, Gary, what's up next?
Great, thank you. Still on COVID, so Nancy and Stephen, please stick around. A quick update for you commissioners on county buildings reopening to the public and employees. First for employees, today you will see in your own email, commissioners, I've created a temporary county policy that all county employees as of this Monday, June 15th, are required to wear face coverings or masks if they cannot maintain at least 6 feet of distance from another employee. So in some cases, that will mean the employee only has to wear the mask when they're in a hallway or near in a small space, and otherwise won't. And others will mean they'll have to wear a mask more frequently. This is a temporary policy, but that includes all county employees, including you, county commissioners, as elected officials, and me. If you can't maintain 6 feet of distance when you're conducting county business, you must wear a mask. There's Chair Bernard wearing a mask. The county will supply those masks to employees, but just an FYI for your benefit, so you are aware, I did make that announcement today to county employees. We were waiting on this mask clarification to now go ahead. That department submitted plans for allowing more employees to return to work at a county building. EOC, finance, facilities, human resources, risk have all reviewed those plans, as have I. So I've approved all those plans last night and this morning. So more employees now can return to work in a county building as soon as tomorrow. But still, I'm asking employees to work remotely if that works for them and the department and the public. Those three areas are met. Employees, I'm encouraging them to continue working remotely. I'm meeting with department directors tomorrow to finalize public reopening plans. I think, and I would like to have this Thursday to offer clarity to you, but I think what I'm going to recommend is that we extend the temporary closure of public buildings just one more week until June 22nd, and then at that point, we'll be prepared to allow some public services to resume, but not all. But I'll have more clarity for you this Thursday on what those department operations can be. If we can conduct business one-on-one by appointment, we have been doing that and we'll continue to do that. And then I think on a grander scale, we can have almost all departments prepared to open to the public in July. But I need to know the departments have fully prepared in allowing the public to be in our buildings, and that's not occurred yet with all departments. They've been working diligently for almost a month now, but there's a lot to be done, as I've already shared with you. Sneeze guards, one-way directional traffic, elevator control, restroom reducing to one person, and all that is not finalized yet countywide. So those are just updates for you. So again, most employees can start returning to work starting tomorrow. Again, most I'm asking to keep working remotely if that's working. As far as the public, I think we can do it on June 22nd, and I'll have more clarity for you on Thursday. So any questions or comments about any of the things I just shared?
Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, Gary, I think that it would be prudent for us as the Board of County Commissioners and us working in the Commissioner's office to set a date certain that we go back to work, because I think, under the principle or the thing of leading by example, I think if we're going to demonstrate to our employees that it's safe to go to work, then we should be doing the same. And I'm ready. I think we can practice take those precautions, but I think it's incumbent upon us to demonstrate that if we're asking our employees to go back, we believe it's safe to go back as well.
December 24th.
That's a great point, Commissioner. And commissioners individually, you are allowed, of course, can come to the office at any time. Part of that is your staff. I want to make sure your staff, your policy advisors, are comfortable coming back to the office. They also have needs and may not all feel comfortable coming back. So I need to confirm that with our staff. Commissioner Savas, you raise a great point, and I'd like your conversation now, commissioners. When do you want to go back to having live, in-person policy sessions and business meetings? I will say, from my perspective, these remote meetings have been very successful. We have had more public involvement than before, than people coming into the building. They have been watching online more than we have when you met in person. But also there's a different dynamic when you're online versus in person. So if you'd like to at least start talking, you don't have to decide today, but if you'd like to give some guidance, when would you like to physically be together for your business meetings or policy sessions? When would you start to reopen to that? What are your thoughts?
Commissioner Henderson?
Well, speaking for myself, the sooner the better. I'm ready to come back to work and certainly don't have a problem complying with the appropriate safety precautions. I do have one backing up, I rescind the motion that was left hanging in the last conversation. So the record should reflect that. Is it possible to do our sessions on Zoom as well as in person, technologically.
Yes, our public and government affairs staff is looking into exactly what that looks like. It does mean well, we'd have to think about that. You could not be in the same, well, you could be in the same room. You can't be on your own laptops in the same room because of the feedback, as you know when we tested this. So either you would be in your own separate offices. Well, no, I don't know yet. Yes, there is a way. We'll find a way. I need PJ staff to advise us on that. They're looking into that, what that looks like.
Was it, for instance, if we were sitting at our tables in the office in a group, could a single camera be focused on us as a board, but that go to Zoom as well as being recorded in the other ways that we record?
I believe that's possible. Our staff is checking into what that looks like. Yes.
Okay.
Definitely doing a hybrid meeting where you're in person and a Zoom component is probably the next step, and our staff is looking into that for you.
Well, I'll reiterate, the sooner we can get back to work, the better as far as I'm concerned.
Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, I concur with that. I wanted it, my comments were more about a hybrid mode. I agree. And I think we've learned a lot about Zoom. I think we've got some tremendous advantages that encourage community involvement, but also that those that are prone to actually don't have access to Zoom or don't want to participate in that kind of mode are handicapped in the sense that they don't have the means that they're accustomed to, which is being in person and testifying. So, just a couple hybrid models. One, I think Commissioner Humberson just spoke to, we could potentially be in our offices with the door closed, and we could sit back behind the computer and operate, but the public doesn't have access to us. We could be on the dais. I think, Gary, maybe technical TS could confirm this, but I think that if we had our laptop or iPads in front of us and we all remained on mute, we could actually have both opportunities for public involvement, both on the Zoom and both in person. So I think that there's a way to do that. I would somehow, I know the dais we're not 6 feet apart, and I think that we ought to be leading by example. So I think that whatever the setting is, maybe it's not the dais, but we should be 6 feet apart. And I know that wearing a mask and being on Zoom, you're muffled, so you don't speak clearly. So we need to be at least 6 feet apart, frankly, in a well-ventilated room to make sure that we're leading by example and keeping one another safe and our families safe. So whatever we do, I want to make sure those precautions are there, but they were also being transparent. We're also giving the opportunity for everyone to participate. So can we work on some of those models and see what's possible? And I think maybe the standard ought to be 8 feet or 9 feet apart from one another, and with the public far enough away that they feel safe as well if they choose to walk in the building and attend.
Chair Bernard and then Commissioner Fisher.
I think that we've learned a lot, and there are meetings we should continue to do on Zoom. The listening posts, occasionally, maybe once a month, we do a Zoom meeting for our business meeting. We've had tremendous response from people. It's just so much better than having meetings in the hearing room. Heck, we could remodel that and put new offices in there, and maybe the DA in there. But the advantage to this Zoom is tremendous outreach for around the county. So yeah, we can't let this go, and I think we should consider doing Zoom meetings, once a month, so that people who can't come during the day or night can sit at their desk at work and participate. It's been great. And having Nancy and Dr. present there in their offices, they don't have to take a lot of time, is a big advantage. Thank you.
Commissioner Fisher.
So there are a couple advantages that we've experienced. For me, I like the virtual nature of all of the materials. That's really helpful, but I have a computer screen in front of me, and then I have 2 screens for a computer. On one screen, I have the Oregon Health Authority's COVID website up. On the other screen, I have our agenda, which links me to any materials that we might have. It's extremely efficient to work during these meetings as far as being very engaged with the conversation and with the materials that I need to be reviewing at the same time. So that's something that we cannot duplicate in person, and all of the paper that has been spent before, when we used to do things before, is a huge cost, and we can have some cost savings by doing things more virtually. So whatever we do, however we evolve, I think we need to keep that in the forefront of our thoughts. And then the second thing is, I really think we do need to lead by example. And that means right now the governor is suggesting that to work remotely as you can work remotely. So I think we need to continue as practical to work remotely. And more people off the roads, less opportunity for there to be accidents, injuries, illness. And, quite frankly, given that I have a daughter who has significant developmental disabilities that lives in a foster care home, I am not at a place where I'm willing to take risks at all. I do go to a restaurant, but I make sure that they follow correct protocols, and I will do all those things. I don't want to put myself at unnecessary risk, because it puts her and all the members of her home at risk. And so until we're out of the woods on this, I think we need to work remotely as much as possible. And I think that is modeling for our employees what needs to be for safety.
Nancy Bush.
Thank you. I just wanted to go back to Commissioner Savis's, some of his points. That I wanted to point out that the buildings are, especially the PSB and the DSB right now, they do have signage. There's sneeze guards up, elevator signs where you can only have 2 people in the elevator. They have to have their mask on. There's signs in the bathrooms. So the buildings are prepared for the most part. We're still, I think we're still getting some sneeze guards in because everybody wants them. So there's some other facilities that are looking for that. But I just wanted to mention that the buildings, there's signs on the floor that say stay 6 feet apart. So those things, many of those things are done, especially in the PSB and the DSB and some of the other main buildings here on campus.
Commissioner Savis.
I just want to go back to build on this lead by example. If we're going to ask our employees to go back to work, I think at least some of us, if one of us is not comfortable doing that, then I think that person can work remotely if they choose. But I think it's important that we practice what we preach, and we take those precautions. There are advantages to Zoom. There are advantages to working remotely, but there's also disadvantages. And some of the disadvantages for me is, access to documents or being able to print something off, and finding things. So I maybe Commissioner Fisher is, and no doubt maybe better versed working remotely, not remotely, but virtually or online. I gravitate towards paper, and reading documents and rereading them and making notes. And I know there's some software that allows you to do all of that, and some of that I use, but it's very difficult. And I have 4 screens going. Okay, I have this one, I have my iPad, and I'm moving 2 phones and looking up data, trying to keep everything going. And I've always wanted to use the share documents, because how we share documents, right, so we can see the same thing, is very difficult. I'm ready, so to speak, to start sharing documents, but we've got work to do. And I think the budget committee week exercise was a great example where we just didn't have those amenities or features available to us. And I think we could have done better work.
Well, I thought it was great. I think, why don't we set a date and we could work out of our office having our meetings, and if Commissioner Fisher or any one of us wants to stay home and do their work, great. So we do our business, our work sessions and our policy sessions, or business meetings and policy sessions, Zoom until sometime in July. I thought we should just wait till after the 4th of July. And we could just do our meetings out of our office until, and then we're all here. We can share all that we want if you're here. And what, so you want to set a date and do that, or what?
How about let's let our public and government affairs staff come up with what the options are for doing both the live and Zoom meeting jointly, so you can see what those are. Let's aim for a July. Let's aim for July for you to come back for face-to-face meetings. So that gives us 3 weeks here to present a proposal to you on what that looks like. Would you be willing?
After the 4th.
After July 4th, but in the next 3 weeks, we'll talk about it with you and what the options are, and then you can make a decision in the next 3 weeks. But it will not be till July that you'd physically come back.
Yeah, I'm here in the office today, so, and there are members of staff here.
Well, I was hoping we'd do it sooner, but whatever the majority chooses to do.
All right, shall we move to the next issue?
Okay, moving on. So with what Commissioner Savas mentioned earlier, commissioners, do you want to have a check-in meeting, I call it? We tried it for 1 week where you met Monday, Wednesday, Fridays in the afternoon for a chance to enhance communication, to keep you all up to speed more frequently than just Tuesdays and Thursdays. We did it for the 1 week. The second week was budget meetings, and then really now's a chance. We haven't had it since. So Commissioner Savas made some points about the value of doing that. So I'm asking you, do you want to resume those meetings, do them on a different frequency? Look, I admit, once you're back in person, the communication will be in many ways enhanced because you're face-to-face and you can have those quick conversations with yourselves and staff. But until then, do you want to resume those meetings, or is there a different approach to help you get the information you need and to more timely communicate?
I don't need those meetings.
I did not find them beneficial.
Well, I don't think that we all, frankly, I don't think we all gave it a fair shot. Not one of them was attended fully. And I think that the communication breakdowns or maybe our slow response, whether it is slow on phase 1, whether it's slow on phase 2, or whether it's slow on responding to the George Floyd, our response to that matter, I think we've been slow. And I think it's a handicap. I don't think we've deliberately been slow. I don't think it's our intention to be slow, but as a result of this handicap of working remotely, or this fragmentation, if you will, maybe that's not the best word. I don't think that we're functioning on hitting on all cylinders right now.
Okay. Anybody else? Seeing no.
Oh, sorry. I just unmuted. It didn't raise my hand. I thought it was helpful when we had the meetings because we were looking at opening and we had a lot of input about that. So I thought that when we did it, it was useful. I do think that going forward, I still get really good information from the strategy session. Caroline and Tracy, the notes they take, I think are excellent. I very rarely have a question where I need clarification, but if I do, they get back to me and I feel really informed. I think my concern about having the whole commission meet so frequently is that it sort of circumvents the structure that we have in the county that I think works really well for the chair and the vice chair to be the point for Gary to make any immediate decisions. I just think that works well. I do not feel out of the loop. I just don't feel out of the loop at all because of the excellent note-taking of our staff. And Gary, I think it's really your call your time is so valuable. if you feel that your communication with Commissioner Schrader and Chair Bernard is working well because you guys are having strategy all the time. If that's working well as a process and a system, I don't want to add another meeting to it. I'm happy to read those notes and connect with staff when I have questions.
Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, if I said that I feel out of the loop, I apologize for that. If I did say that, if I did say that, I certainly didn't intend to say that the strategy meetings of the chair and the vice chair aren't or somehow insufficient. What I'm talking about is the dynamics that just it's so fluid and so dynamic that waiting a week, and I'll use the latest example, waiting a week or two, and still here we are today, it's Tuesday, and the public doesn't know this. I know we'll talk about it later, but the communications about how we message out to our constituents about the George Floyd issue, we could have done that last week in a better setting, and as a result of that, if we had met Monday and Wednesday and Friday, even for half an hour, we could have made sure that we had done that in a more timely way. All I'm saying, it slowed things down. I'm not talking about much of anything else. I don't want it to be, it's not a criticism. It's not a result of or a lack thereof of the chair or vice chair or the strategy situation. It's our ability to communicate. And
I
normally,
thought we did give a message last Thursday.
Normally when we're in the offices, we had our staff who communicated to our other staff and the administrator. We were all working together in the building. So we had that machinery in place. That machinery is not in place. So in lieu of not meeting till July, if that's the wishes of the board not to meet in the building until July 4th, then in lieu of, maybe this is a temporary means to get there. If you don't think things are very dynamic and there's not a lot happening, then I agree, maybe it's not necessary, but let's face it, there's a lot happening right now. You know, we could have called an emergency meeting last week. I think we should have. We didn't.
Yeah, Paul, I don't disagree with you. I think our challenge with last week was that we had budget that took the week, that really kind of messed us up. And I was really kind of struggling myself, not having better communications. As Gary knows, I had to keep bugging him with all of the things that came up and the interactions that I was having. So I hear you. I'm thinking that was an anomaly, but I'm going to defer to Gary on this as far as where I would weigh in, because I really think his time is extremely valuable. And I don't know that it is going to be useful for him to have all the strategy meetings and then have the whole board so frequently, because we do meet twice a week, usually. That's good.
All right, so I am one of your 2 employees, commissioners. I am here to serve you. Do not worry about how I spend my time. My time is to help you be successful and to provide you the information you need to make good policy decisions. With that, this is a two-way street. Staff is here to support you. I'm also asking you to be flexible and nimble, especially in the time of crisis, on how we communicate and how we make decisions. So really, you tell me what you need, please.
Commissioner Humberston?
If you want to set aside time for those check-ins, Gary, on your schedule, that's fine. If those of us who choose to show up can show up, those of us who choose not to don't have to. If you think there is something urgent that we should show up for, you can always shoot us a quick email. But quite frankly, as I said before, I didn't get much value from it before. I had one question during that whole period of time, which could have easily been answered without a special meeting, quite frankly. If you want to set your time aside for those who feel the need, that's fine. I don't personally.
Commissioner Schrader?
So Gary, we normally meet with you one-on-one, at least all of us, right, during the week?
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm okay doing that. Paul, if you want to meet I'll meet with you 3 times if you want. I'm okay. I figure out as long as I'm in contact with Gary, I'm feeling okay. I feel like I've got what I need. And then I talk to Tracy every morning. You know, we go through stuff. So, and frankly, in a lot of this, I feel that a lot of it's out of our control. Nobody saw George Floyd coming. And the response, I think we actually have come up with a good response. I've been aware that there have been some emails from folks. I don't know what else we could have said, really. I think the response was measured and done well about how we all feel about this. I don't know if people want us to be more radical. I don't know. It's all abhorrent to every single one of us. And I don't know. Gary, I did see that you responded to some of those folks. Okay.
Yes.
And, you know, I can't, as a woman of privilege, I'll own that. But I've also had an interracial family that's experienced a lot of that kind of stuff. So, you know, I don't know. Anyway. So I guess, Gary, if you want to meet with us, do you hear the dogs in the background? Have somebody clean. Okay, someone is cleaning my roof, okay, right now, which is why I've been hopping up and down, okay? I'll go find my little buzzer thing, okay? But listen, Paul, if you want to meet once a week, I'd be glad to do it with you. And I'm used to the dogs. I don't even hear them anymore. But anyway, okay.
All right, let's move on. We're beating this thing to death. I'm not, you know, Paul wants to meet. I've got enough going on. I don't need anything else. So let's move on to the next issue. It sounds like 3 people are satisfied. If the others want to meet. Okay?
I have one last question with barking dogs in the background. Gary, why don't we set it up so Paul and I meet with you together? Would that be okay? Then you at least would feel, would that make it be better? Because then you'd feel like you'd be bouncing stuff off.
I'm going to jump in because Martha's kind of directed a question to me, I think twice. And I just want to say that's not the issue, Martha. And I don't think that would bring the value that I'm talking about. I'll just say it again, and I'll say it a little bit differently.
Yeah.
The issue with we wanted, as I saw from the communications, we wanted to have a prepared statement coming from the board about the George Floyd matter and how we would take action. So my comment was, if it's going to come from the board, it should come from the board. We need to talk about it. Okay. And then the last communication this morning was, here's a 4th proposal, none of which I've had any influence on. And I'm trying to do this in a very transparent way and working together with ourselves, not sure whose ideas are what and what your ideas are, but without discussing it, how do we actually provide a statement or anything on an issue of this magnitude without talking with each other? And this morning it says we're not going to talk about it. Here's 4 options, none of which came from us. Now maybe a little bit came from this person or a little bit came from that person, but if it's truly going to come from the board, it should come from the board. Where does it start? It starts with the discussion amongst the 5 of us. That's not happening. That's what I'm trying to convey. We are handicapped. We're not deliberately doing this. We are handicapped because we don't have the ability or not setting aside the time. If we're all too busy, then I understand that you all feel that way. I don't feel that way. Yeah, we're busy. I'm busy, but this is important.
All right, well, let's move on. I mean, we got other issues.
Okay, so we'll move on, and it segues what you were just talking about. So, commissioners, do you want to make a county statement on racial injustice in Clackamas County? And yes, there have been staff who have recommended several options, but I'm suggesting throw all those out, and you tell us what would you like to do as a commission, and you have time to talk about it right now.
Yeah, well, so the original document was a joint statement between the sheriff. Actually, I believe the sheriff wrote it, and had some concerns about it. You know, the police departments across the country, I wouldn't say well, I guess they are sort of under siege. But you know, I think that some of the comments in the letter that the sheriff put us in a position of having to pay for various costs that frankly I think should come from the sheriff's budget and not ours. You know, and in some ways I agree that we should spend more money on social services, mental health, and a lot less money putting people in jail, frankly. So I think that a joint statement from the commission would be great, but I think we need to really be serious and honest about where we invest our money. And some of that is in mental health folks driving along with the sheriff. I believe that program is cut, but it was before the budget. That's my understanding, Sonia. You're looking like, huh, really? I heard that was cut. And the mental health beds, which we asked the sheriff to reconsider, they're cut. You know, and frankly, I don't think people should go to jail when they have a mental health problem, unless they, well, even if they commit a crime, as long as it's not dangerous. I mean, this is a big discussion. We could go on for a long time. But if somebody would like to draft a letter, the commission could review. Be happy to do that. I know Sonia's done some work on that. And Martha, you're talking, but your mic's not on. I think you're talking. Oh, okay. So what do you, somebody want to draft a letter for the commission to review?
Commissioner Humberson has his hand raised, Chair Bernard.
I don't even see him. Oh, there he is. Okay. Yes.
In giving this some thought for some time, the one thing that I don't see in any of the proposed statements is that we've had a conversation with our Equity and Diversity Commission that meets with on a regular basis. That I think it's LDIC, it's called. A simple resolution on Thursday condemning racism in general is a fine statement, quite frankly. Beyond that, any further statements we make, I think, should be made after we've had a chance to actually sit down face to face with our LDIC advisory group and really work through the issues from their perspective. We have not heard from them at all. So until we do that, quite frankly, an extended statement, I don't think it does anything other than show us being somewhat paternalistic. A simple statement of condemnation of racism of some sort is appropriate. Beyond that, what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, all of those kinds of things, I think ought to be part of a conversation with that group.
Yeah, you know, I suggested yesterday, I believe, in strategy that we, you know, our 10% of our employees are people of color, that we ought to have a county-wide discussion with those folks to hear the real life stories, so that we can understand the perspective that they've lived their lives. And at the same time, you know, our that group could organize that, and we could have that discussion along with our leadership that are people of color, just to have the discussion to really start thinking about it. I have no idea. So I did suggest that, and I know we're looking into doing something like that. And I was thinking about in September, because it takes a little bit of time. Also, our diversity, equity, inclusion officer will be hired by then. I think it's called an officer, right, Gary? Will be hired by then, along with staff to support. And I think that's what we need to do. Right now, I agree with you totally, Ken. You know, we condemn racism, we condemn George Floyd's murder, and we as a county need to have a discussion how we change the environment.
I mean, that just seems to me to be the better way to go, because we have not spent the time that we should spend actually listening to the people whose lives are impacted.
Commissioner Fisher and then Commissioner Schrader.
Yeah, so I do know that Sue Hildick is in the process of getting us a joint meeting with our local equity, diversity and inclusion council. That's in the process of a doodle poll. So our public affairs has totally been on this. We have received letters and communications from people inside and outside, inside our organization and outside on this issue. And what is very clear to me is that we really need to do what Ken is saying, what Jim is saying, and that is to really engage in a listening session. Last night, has anybody seen the 13th Amendment, the documentary? Any hands raised? That was suggested to me by one of our staff as a really great resource. I suggest everybody go on Netflix and watch that documentary tonight. It really is excellent in framing what the issues are. And then if you look at all of us, white people, one of the most compelling things is our ancestors chose the life that we are living now. For African Americans, Black Americans, their ancestors did not choose to be taken from their land and to be slaves. It's a real dichotomy, the intergenerational racism that exists and what it means to between privilege and not privilege. It is so deep. The other thing that documentary talked about is in our prison population in the United States, 1 in 17 white men are in prison. For African Americans, it's 1 in 3. So if you look at the disparities that are so well framed in that document, I'm just saying, we have a lot of learning to do. So we really need to listen to what the issues are. We need to lean in and really take the difficult comments and be open and responsive and not pretend that we have the answers, but we have the responsibility to educate ourselves and not just depend on everybody else to spoon feed us the information. The Urban League of Portland put together a report that from 2015 that is very relevant to today, that lays out every policy objective from local government to state government, for human services, for law enforcement, for justice, it's an excellent resource. And we need to spend the time, take the time delving in and learning, because we have that responsibility as leaders.
Commissioner Schrader?
I just have a clarifying question. We have 2 groups, don't we? We have an internal group and then we have an external group of advisors. Is that correct, Gary?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So when we have these conversations, is it going to be with both groups together? Are we starting out internally first in our own county? And then are we going to pull in the other folks, or we're just going to have a dialogue with both groups at the same time? That would be that's just a logistical question.
The recommendation is you start with your external group, the advisory board of community members who advise you. They're called Leaders in Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, LEDIC. So start with that group. And then, as Chair Bernard has mentioned, later on have a meeting with the employee group, which is called Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Council, EDIC, and other employees of color.
Commissioner Schrader, you're on mute.
Know when the dogs are going to go off again. So is the focus going to be similar with both groups? Because what we're hearing from internally is that we have not had a strong enough response as commissioners. Okay. And then the external group is feeling as if we haven't contacted them at all. Is that like a fair kind of a assessment?
For internally, yes. For externally, I think that the community is looking for a strong signal from our commissioners about what is your view on racism, and to condemn it. And beyond words, what can we do as an organization in our community to help eradicate racism?
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Schmidt?
Yes, thank you. And oh, I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, how embarrassing. Oh, yes. Something you could do, commissioners, is you could do a resolution directly related to this event with Mr. Floyd. And I'll say it myself, and you sort of said this as well, that you denounce racism of all kinds, that internally at the organization, and I would say this, that we have a zero tolerance policy for any racial acts that is will be investigated, and discipline will occur if that indeed occurs, that we need training to address microaggressions that happen every single day to women, to people of color, to LGBTQ, any person who feels marginalized. That happens every day in any organization, but it happens right here at Clackamas County for our employees. That I, as the operational leader, will do all I can to support our employees, all employees, especially employees of color. So I think that is something you could do. And then for our community, you will stand up to support our community to eradicate racism in Clackamas County. So that's something you could do in the form of an immediate resolution. We can pop that out for you by this Thursday. But again, to Commissioner Savis's earlier point, this is a chance for you to direct staff. What would you like to do? You did make a statement, sort of, last Thursday. Chair Bernard did. You each gave your own individual comments. It was reported in the Pamplin papers, thanks to Sam, our reporter, who attends your meetings. And so he has reported on that. So the community has heard your views and your words. So the question is, what would you like to do next? And that's what the topic is today. Thank you.
Commissioner Savis?
Thank you, Gary. I think your email really this morning kind of summed it up, that we should either decide whether we're going to make a joint statement. I'm reading it, a joint statement from the sheriff, or a resolution, all the above. What, a four-word statement? I think you gave us like 4 options, and with the advice of, or the statement, we will not wordsmith because we don't have time. So I agree with the summary that we should figure out what we're going to do. I don't think it's appropriate at this point in time to have a joint statement with the sheriff. If the sheriff wants to go beyond what he posted in Facebook, that's fine. I didn't think about looking at Facebook. I went to the website this weekend on Sunday night to see what was on the sheriff's website. I didn't see it there, but it didn't occur to me to look at Facebook to find that statement, which I think a number of other sheriffs or police chiefs may have signed. I think that's what I found that he put out. I thought that I saw the resolution, I believe, that the Oregon City School District did. I thought that was a good frame. I agree with Commissioner Humberson's comments. Essentially, on Thursday in my comments, one of my comments was, we really need to listen. And what that really meant was internal, external, everywhere. It's been a lot of reflection since this all occurred. I've every day, and I said this Thursday, I believe to some degree, I keep on reflecting back to, the experiences that I have witnessed and seen, and things that were, I guess, targeted, or how my family was targeted. I think it is important that we have a statement. If it boils down to us having individual statements, I mean, that would be a shame, but I would like at least something. And I thought maybe the best thing, the safest ground would be to, if we're not going to talk about it, again, I'm going to qualify that, if we're not going to talk about it in great detail and take the time, that maybe we just try to take some of those things from some other that other jurisdictions have done and pull them in together. I think it's clear that we all, condone, or we do not condone, and we denounce what took place. And I just think that when we think that this is, the reaction is around the globe, around the planet, around the world, that this, we're at a tipping point. And I think that sometimes, I would say that I was just thinking about the things that I've witnessed, and whether they're bullying or whether it's, just actual discrimination, or whether it's, picking on someone because they're weaker, or making a joke about someone because of whatever. I've been the victim. We've all probably been victims of that, but whether they're aggressions or they're microaggressions, there's a lot out there, and I think we cannot ignore the fact that there are people of color that have been impacted negatively as a result of that, and I think I'm proud to say as a county commissioner that we have not tolerated racism. I know that each of my colleagues has denounced that. And I think that's important for everyone to know. I think we need to make a strong statement that we denounce any kind of racism, and we will not tolerate that, period. I think we need to be as strong as that. So, but if we can't give the time, I don't think if we can't give the time to talk through this or work on something and do it in a timely way, I don't think that reflects well on us as an organization.
I don't think anyone said we're not given the time. I'm looking at the Oregon City resolution. I just got it up. I think we should do a resolution for Thursday. We should look at Oregon cities and maybe some others and have our staff write up a resolution, or Sonia can write it, or I'll write it. Gary can write it. He's a great communicator. But we should do a resolution for for Thursday.
Yeah, so Chair Bernard, I did wordsmith yours, got that to Gary, got that to Sue, gave it to you for some just suggested language. But so I think Sue and PGA probably has enough information between Oregon City's resolution, between your statement, between my statement to propose something.
Okay.
And then I just suggest that people get back to our PGA with their direct input, and they can synthesize it all and get it back out to us, and that we have that ready.
All right.
Commissioner Humberston?
Yeah, I would just like to suggest that the resolution should be simple, clean, and direct. It does not have to be particularly wordy, because I think that the subject matter is very clean and very clear. That being said, what's going to be more critically important, in my estimation, is not what we say, but what we do following it up. And so I want to emphasize the importance of sitting down with our internal and external groups and hearing what they have to say, what their recommendations are, what their stories are, and build a plan going forward that actually will have a positive, pragmatic, feet on the ground impact on people's lives, both internally and externally. Pretty words are fine, but if they're not followed up by concrete action, they don't mean much. So I want to make sure that we do have that follow through. Maybe one aspect of that resolution should include a commitment to that follow through. I'll leave it to the wordsmiths to figure that part of it out.
Commissioner Savas?
Well, so when I knew that there were some of us, I know that Commissioner Bernard was working on something and Commissioner Fisher was inputting, and I was asking for us to discuss it. The reason I was asking for us to discuss it was so that we could abide by public meetings law. If we all start inputting, then it's, and I want to input. I want to be involved in what that is. I don't want a minority of the board to be crafting something and not have my input in there. I want my input in there, but I'm trying to abide and not abide by state law, public meetings law, and to make sure that we're doing our work properly. And I have the opportunity to input. I'm being excluded because no one's deliberately excluding me, but as a result of me abiding, I'm excluding myself. and I don't want to be excluded. I want to be involved.
Paul, there's nothing that violates public meeting laws for you to see something that's publicly posted and to give your comments, give your thoughts to anyone.
I am referring to a message from the board on this topic. From the board. We are the board. The 5 of us are the board, not 2 of us, the 5 of us.
So in my statement, I specifically identified specific things like reviewing our laws and ordinances to remove racism. And I think that would be a good end to the resolution. It's action. I've heard a lot of people say a lot of things, but what people really want is action. So in the end of the resolution, there is action. We've asked our county council to review all our laws and ordinances on our books, which could take years, and remove any racist, discriminatory language. And I think that's a big step. First we condemn, and then we commit to removing racism and bias from our laws and regulations. So Gary, do you have a direction on where to go on that?
Yeah, so I have a process question. So we can call an emergency board meeting tomorrow afternoon where you can review a draft and give feedback prior to Thursday's business meeting, or you see the draft at Thursday's business meeting and you can comment, give edits and suggestions, and then we can try and make that before the end of your business meeting so you can approve it. So I probably recommend you hold a special meeting tomorrow so you have a chance to look at it over. Paul, Commissioner Savas, I never suggested you not wordsmith it. I meant today not wordsmith it until we got direction from the board. It appears you're giving us direction to do a resolution. We can call a special board meeting tomorrow for you to have a chance to edit it in public together, give feedback, and then it can be ready to go for this Thursday. Would you all agree to that?
I have some time, in the morning, 8 to 11, and then in the afternoon. Morning would be best.
Well, Gary, appreciate that. I was looking for the opportunity to create wordsmith, whatever you want to say. I'll prepare something on my own and submit it.
Okay.
So do you want a special meeting tomorrow as a board to review it, or wait till Thursday and you'll review it there and then approve it, or not?
Well, why can't you just send it out to us to review it? Why do we have to have a meeting?
I need Stephen Madcourt. He's here. Stephen, what can the board do via public, so we don't violate public records meeting or laws? Can they give feedback on an email document?
Yes, they can. You're coming out with a statement. You're not making decisions. You're not deliberating. You're coming out with a collective statement. You could have a shared Google Doc where you guys could word that as a live document even.
So the board could give feedback via email, but the decision will be in public when they review it on Thursday.
Right.
Okay.
And there is no breach of rules by doing that. Never has been. All right, so let's do that. Let's somebody work up a general statement. Paul, send in your stuff, and Sonia, Martha, and let's try to get a decent document. I'd like to see some of the things I said in my statement be included. But we can send that out by tomorrow, and we can all review it and get it back no later than Wednesday at 5 o'clock.
And I just want to comment. I'm fine looking at other people's. I'm okay seeing what other people are putting forward and adding to it. I'm okay with that. So I think we have some templates. Let's just work with them.
Yep.
So.
All right, so we'll add to your business meeting agenda for this Thursday a resolution on race racial injustice. Staff will will put together all the various versions of documents you've seen. If you have ideas, send them forward. We'll email you this draft by the end of today for you to add comments on tomorrow, and then you will not make a decision until you discuss it in public on Thursday. That's what we'll do. Okay, with that, I propose we adjourn for the morning chair. We can continue this afternoon after your last policy session.
How many more issues do we have?
There's about 10, but these are really quick updates, mostly
Okay.
from me, so we should be able to get through them.
All right, great. So it'd be great if somebody maybe could send us that draft today on the, okay?
Yes, by
So
the end of today, we'll have a draft, a starting point draft for you to look at.
Okay, thank you. All right, we're adjourned till 1:30, correct?
Yes,
All right, thanks.
thank you.
Bye.